Morning, Melanie. So, can you tell me a little bit about what is the masterclass you've written all about?
I've written the Build Your Change Network masterclass in response to um, it is one of the most asked for pieces of advice and guidance, particularly from people who are just getting started in a formal change role in their organization. They recognize that perhaps bringing together enthusiastic people, call them change agents, call them change champions, but they know that that's going to be the secret to getting awareness of the change, getting participation in the change. They just don't really know how to get started on that. So it's in response to it's always asked for.
Okay, so how did you structure the content so that you got it in a kind of 5 hour window of study? So, how did you do that?
Yes, you're right. There's so much you can say. It's hard to create something that's only a few hours long, but we wanted to make sure that in these masterclasses, people can get all the important information. They can study it in small bites, but it covers everything that they need. So I think for me, it was thinking about giving some practical guidance on structure, membership of the Change Network, and lots of practical techniques about genuinely how does this happen? How do you do it? Who do you need to involve? So to keep the time within a reasonable amount of time for people to study, it was all about giving practical examples, practical techniques, not lots of theory, not lots of historical explanations of what change is, but just get down to this is what you want to do, this is how you do it.
Brilliant. And I was going to come on to that as my next question. So, a little bit about how do you balance theory and practical advice?
I think when you're designing these masterclasses, you have to always include a little bit of structural information. I wouldn't go as far as calling it theory, but I think you have to give some structural information to explain what is it we're talking about. So, what is a change network? What are the names it goes by? Who are likely to be the members? Why do organizations use this approach to get people involved in change and to get them participating and cascading the change through their own organization? So I think you have to do some scene setting, but after that, it's how do you do this? How do you do that? So I think it's having a rule about ensuring that every time I explain something, I always have a practical example or a story about how I've done it or why it's so important. And I think we can do that because this masterclass series and the one I wrote, Building Your Change Network, comes from a place of experience. People involved in these masterclasses do this for a living, have done these things many times. And so they have shortcuts and they have handy hints and up to the minute guidance and experience to share. And that's what I wanted to ensure we built into every masterclass.
Excellent. That's really good. And thinking about these kinds of topic of change networks, I know there's a lot of material out there. What's your unique perspective or expertise that makes it worthwhile doing your masterclass?
I think possibly because I've set up so many and I have seen them go very wrong. And I've also got so much experience for the most common questions that are asked. What is it that people need to know? So it really does cut to the chase and gives people just the essentials in this masterclass based on these are your most likely questions because I've seen them time and time again. I have set up these networks in all sorts of organizations around the world. So I've faced different cultural challenges, different challenges by industry and type of service that the organization might be providing or the customers that it services. I've set up these networks for different types of change, centrally controlled, more localized change, whether it's a digital transformation or whether it's a restructuring. So I've got so many examples and I've been able to work across all of them to find all of the most useful points that people will go, well, I really wanted to know that. And sometimes you don't know what you want to know And having an expert who said, well, I've heard this question a lot of times, and therefore I'd suggest you want to know this, this, and this. That's immensely helpful.
Excellent. And as you were researching this topic and preparing for this masterclass, going through all your experience, were there any kind of key lessons or insights that came to mind that you want to share?
I think the thing that surprises people every single time, when it comes to setting up a change network, the 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 ongoing management of it takes a lot of time. It's not enough just to form a network. And often at the start of a change, there are people around who want to volunteer. So it can often be mobilized quite quickly. But it's the ongoing time to ensure that those people are very clear on what's expected of them, and that you're supporting them in what's expected of them through providing training to them, coaching them when they hit a situation they're not sure how to handle it. You're providing them with guidance ahead of the next steps they're going to take. Every single time I help people set up their network, they will feed back to me within a few months. Can't believe how much time my change agents or my change champions need from me. And so I wanted to help people appreciate where that time goes and what to expect if they are in that support role.
Yeah, absolutely. And thinking about your audience now, and really I'm interested in, what impact did you hope this will have on your audience?
I think I wanted to build confidence. I always want to build confidence in people who haven't done it as often as I've done it. I'm at that point where I want to transfer my ability to somebody else. So I always start from the perspective of build confidence, because if you have somebody setting out not only all of the steps you have to take in sort of a logical sequence, but also provides you with real life guidance and advice on every single step, then that builds your confidence that not only can you do this action, but you know how to do all the ones that are coming up as well. And I also want to always save people's time. By explaining what's involved, people can think, oh, okay, that's what I'm going to have to do. They don't have to waste their own time trying to guess what's involved or trying to sort of reinvent the wheel that already exists and people like me have been doing for years. So it is always about passing on any time-saving tips I can.
Yep. Oh, excellent. And I know this masterclass has been running for a little while now. So have you had any surprising or memorable feedback from your audience?
I think the feedback that I always remember, the gratitude around the practicality of it. People will tell me that perhaps they've read other things about change networks. And as you've said, there is a lot of material out there. But often the comparison that people make when they give me feedback is that what's available out there is quite theoretical and almost feels like a lecture. You should do this, this, and this, but doesn't give them any ideas about how practically to do it. Whereas the feedback I get, people will share with me their favorite techniques or their favorite moment when they go, I didn't realize about that. Oh, that was a really good idea. And that was exactly the situation I was facing. And you told me about it before it happened to me. And so I think it's that feeling that, oh, yeah, this is really relevant. This is really helpful. That is the kind of feedback that I live for.
Yeah, absolutely. And if somebody who's watching the masterclass could take just one thing away from it, what would it be?
I think it's think ahead. It's remembering very simply that this network, it's a network, and the purpose of it is to drive the change down to every single individual that has to change. Everybody who's going to have to work differently or want somebody to support them. And so always start from that position of whatever size or scale of change you have, or size or scale of your organization, you're going to have to build a cascade network. Step by step, you're going to have to think, how are we driving the change down further and further and further? So you start at almost a divisional or department level, and then you think about the offices, the locations, maybe the teams within that. And then you drive down further into the teams within those teams and making sure that you have change agents at every level or change champions at every level that somebody can always go to. So that first moment of I need to get the structure that's relevant to my organization, the type of change that we're doing. And the second piece of advice that I think is really important is to recognize we're now in a world of multiple simultaneous change. So if you are thinking about a change agent network, a key piece of advice is to think, do they already exist? Do other changes in my organization already have this structure? Will I be mimicking something that already exists when actually I could add to or make use of something that already exists? And I think when there's so much change happening and there are so many calls on people's time, on the same people, because they're the reliable ones, the ones most likely to volunteer, the ones with the experience, you've got to think very carefully about how perhaps you build a relationship with other changes that are happening. And that's definitely addressed in this masterclass.
Yeah, excellent. And it's interesting, you were talking about the amount of simultaneous change, but looking ahead, what kind of trends do you see and emerging topics in the field that are happening right now?
I think a lot of what's happening right now is in response to the volume of change. I run the change capability survey year on year. And for the last couple of years, it's been about 40% of people answering the survey say that their people have enough time to cope with change. So that's 6 in 10 people who just don't feel they can cope with the volume of change. So I think everything that we are going to be doing in terms of change management is about working in an environment where people just don't have the time. And this phrase, change is at the side of the desk, it's being done in addition to a very large workload, is something we're going to have to keep in mind. So I think that what I've just said about the change network being used perhaps across multiple changes is something to think about. Um, so I think it's that volume of change that will really direct how we are doing things in the future.
Yeah, it is exciting, that thought of running a network for multiple changes. And it makes me think of, what else are you thinking about now for masterclasses? What other content are you likely to be creating?
Well, we have a whole load of experts who write masterclasses at Capability for Change, but the one that I'm doing next is almost supporting this one. Here we are talking about a network of change agents or change champions. So I'm writing a masterclass which is called Change for Non-Change Managers, because the people who are taking part in your network are not change experts. So how do we support them? And how do we make it easy for them to understand everything that's going to be happening to them?
Yeah, brilliant. And I'm going to ask you about that in a few minutes. Before I do, one last question on kind of future and looking ahead. How do you think learning's evolving, and what role do masterclasses play in this shift?
I think learning is evolving as with an awful lot of things happening at work. How can we do it in smaller pieces? How can we do it quicker? How can we use technology to access things when I need to access them and not when somebody's scheduled for me to attend a course in 4 months' time? So I think there is this need for more bite-sized. I think there is a greater familiarity than ever in doing things online. That isn't to negate the power of coming together to work out the solutions to problems, but I think people with time pressure want to get together with other colleagues, having prepped themselves, having understood the subject, having built their own confidence, their own ability, and then they can come together and actually use the time most effectively. So I think this drive towards online learning took a massive leap forward as a result of the global COVID lockdowns. And I think we're still seeing that now. Even if people are coming back into the office on a more regular basis, when it comes to learning, the legacy is platforms like Changeability Pro and the
Yeah.
Masterclass series.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for this interview today.
Pleasure.